Hi everybody, this is Rebecca, the Frugal Resinista, coming at you on a snow day. So I am painting in my jammies. You might hear kids in the background at some point because the kids are all home from school. But today I am going to show you, since I've had some requests, how to do my 3D geode. Okay, I got a huge mess here. This takes a bunch of different supplies, but I will show you how this works. I'm going to explain a little and then I'll probably just speed this up so you can see my process without it taking too long. So today I am using two 5x7 canvases and a 12x24 canvas. The 12x24 is going to be my final geode painting. It's actually going to be vertical. This will be the top, this will be the bottom, but the way it fits on my table, I got to work on it sideways. Okay, so for 3D geodes, I actually attach these smaller canvases to the back, and then I cut through the top canvas so that you can see into these. So I'm not making any cuts yet. The first thing I'm going to do is put these underneath where they go, where I'm going to want them to go, and then I'm going to use a Sharpie and I'm going to draw where the edges of the canvas are. So I know, I'm just feeling where the edges are here. So I know exactly where I'm going to be cutting. Okay, so that's the first one. Now, make sure when you do this that you're measuring this part and not this part, because that is not something you can put any kind of resin in. So there's number one. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing on this side, and I'm putting this one down at this bottom part. So let me find my corner. And obviously this will all be covered with resin too, so I'm not worried about painting or the marker. I'm just going to paint over it. All right, so those are right about where my edges are. All right, so those are the 3D spaces that I am going to work with. Now, I've already chosen my colors. It's good to choose your color ahead of time here. I don't typically do pinks, and so I'm trying to challenge myself to do some pink and some coppery colors. So for now, I'm going to get rid of the big canvas, and what I'm going to do is fill these small canvases with what would be the inside really glassy part of my geode. So just a couple tips. I'm working with decorative filler glass from Michaels. I have a tiny bit left of clear. They're just really sparkly. And then Hobby Lobby, this is just like a pinkish crushed glass that's also filler. And then I have a goldish copper that's a lot tinier that's really shiny that was also Michaels. And they're all just fillers. And then from Stonecoat Countertops, I got some Copper Canyon colored mica flakes. So those are all going to be mixed together. Now, as always, so some money-saving tips for you. These canvases were at Walmart when they were having a sale, and they sell them in 5-packs. So I think these were literally like under $2 each. The mica flakes from Stonecoat I ordered with a big order while there was a promotion going. So I got a big discount for ordering that and my resin and everything. Both of these from Michaels. I only shop at Michaels when I have my 40% off coupons and when they're having big sales. And then Hobby Lobby, they don't have sales, but I don't have a Hobby Lobby in my town, but when I do go, every once in a while I pick up a bunch of this because their prices are always really good. So that's some money-saving tips. What I do, because sometimes the clear glass and everything, once the resin hits it, becomes a little more transparent, is I buy the thick sparkly paper from the craft stores. So I've got a copper paper here, and this mostly won't even be seen, so I'm not real careful with it or anything. But what I do is I just tear a piece out and I lay it in the bottom of where I'm going to do my resin, because if any of the glass becomes kind of clear, then this sparkle will show up underneath. And I just kind of stick it in there. It doesn't have to be perfect because I'm not going all the way to my edges. And so I start with that, and then my glass and resin and everything goes on top of it, just to give it extra sparkle, just in case. So those are both in. And then the other thing I like to do is grab my glue gun, and I seal all these edges so that I don't waste resin that's falling underneath. So let me do that next. Okay, my glue gun is heated up, And like I said, I am just going to go around these edges and seal them with the glue so that I don't waste resin that's going underneath the wood into the canvas in spots that I don't really need it. Okay, so I'm showing you guys a geode that's going to have 2 holes in it so that, that it's 3D in 2 places. And I'm doing that because I have 2 different methods that I use to make these. One is if you want to create a hole that's just a complete hole all the way through where you can see the underside but they're not touching. And then the other way to do it is if you want to just see a dip in into the glassy part of your geode, but you don't want it to be separated. You want it to all touch. So I've sealed off the edges of this one because this one is going to be a complete hole. And you'll see what I mean in a second if it doesn't make sense. And then this one is just going to dip down into our project. Because of that, I do not need to completely seal the edges of that one, and it'll take less resin, but I am going to go ahead and just glue the paper in place so that it doesn't slide when I'm doing everything else. You're going to have a glue gun if you're going to do these 3D geodes because it comes into play later and I use it for a lot. So, okay, so what I'm going to do now is actually mix up some resin, and I'm going to make this first interior of my geode. So I am using Stonecoat Countertops Quick Coat Resin. I do this because I am impatient and I love making these geodes, and if I have a decent amount of time I want to keep working on them, and I can't keep working on them if I have a ton of dry time. So I am going to mix just a little bit of resin. Now also, snow day, I was not planning on painting today. I am out of gloves, so I'm going to try to be really careful because you definitely don't want to get resin on yourself. Okay, just need a tiny bit because right now all I'm doing is filling this one right here. With the glass, again, if you get the glass coated in the resin on the top and the bottom, sometimes it takes away the sparkle of the glass and then you just have maybe kind of tinted see-through glass. So I am putting the resin in first, and then I'm going to sprinkle all the glass in rather than pour resin on top because I want the top of all the glass to not have resin on it so it's still really shiny. And I'm using clear cups, and I just pour these right next to each other so I can kind of eyeball what I need. There we go. Don't need much at all. I might have actually done too much even though I didn't do very much. So there's one. The other thing I always do, because resin is expensive even if you're good about how cheaply you can find it, is I have projects sitting around. So I have like a few half-done things, like here's just a little tile that's got some purple in it. But I just, as I pour resin, if I have extra and this doesn't take all of it, I'll add color real quick and I'll add it to something. I've got some like unfinished magnets and things like that, but they all sit right behind my desk so that if I have a little bit extra, I just add it in, and then eventually those get finished and they're extra products. So that's just a quick tip to save you money also, so that you are not wasting your resin. Alright, I keep these right next to each other and I just eyeball it, which seems to work fine with these. If you want to weigh, you can, but what I found is I actually mess up more when I weigh it because part B in this mixture of the quick coat is denser than part A, so if you weigh them out, you actually don't get the right proportion because you end up with more of A than B. So it's easier to just eyeball it. And you're noticing I'm using toilet paper just to wipe the edges. These get so messy otherwise when you keep pouring. And so I just use a little piece of toilet paper and I wipe the edges, and then the next time it's clean and ready to go. Okay, quick coat is serious about how quick it is. So as soon as I mix this, I have at most 15 minutes working time, and at 15 minutes it's already getting really thick and gooey. So I always get it ready. I get all my supplies ready to dump in. So I've got things here, got everything ready, and as soon as I've got it all covered, I'm going to start dumping things in. So I'm going to mix here. And most of you probably already do this, but you also want to use like a little blowtorch or a heat gun to get the bubbles out of your resin once you've poured it. I have that handy too, so I don't have to go looking for anything since my time frame is short. So it's all right next to me ahead of time. That's the one tricky thing about doing this. If you're not someone who plans ahead and halfway thinks, oh, maybe I should try this instead, it makes it a little tricky. But I've definitely done that before, and then I'm running around my art space trying to grab things quickly before my resin dries. So, all right, just got to mix it all the way. I've had just a couple times where I think I've mixed it all the way, but I didn't do it enough. And then unfortunately, I go to finish a piece, and when I check it the next day, there'll be one sticky spot where I had not mixed it all the way, and I don't want to do that. Because then you got to pour another coat on top, and that's a lot more resin. All right, luckily this mixes pretty well. Okay, so quick coat. I'm going to pour right in here, and I'll spread it around. Start with that much and then see if I need more. So I'm going to spread this just to make sure I've coated everything. Okay. I definitely have extra resin, so I'm going to try to use some of that in a minute here. But so see how adding the copper paper, that costs almost nothing. It's like $1 for the whole sheet, and I can get 5 or 6 out of them. But I'm using this light pink, and see how the pink really kind of disappears a little? So that's why that paper is so important. It's such a small detail, but it adds so much to the look of the inside of your geode. So I'm going to do some clear. And you won't see all of these edges when it's attached to the rest of the canvas. So you don't have to be too careful about your edges and where paper's not underneath and things. All right. And I'm going to come through with my much tinier gold glass, I guess coppery gold. Okay, I think it's looking good so far. And you know, I was going to add the Stonecoat mica flakes, but I think they might be actually too big for this, the way I'm doing this. So I might not do that just yet. I can always go back later and add them if I want to. So that is how I fill the inside. Now I have to remember to have enough of all of this because it's also going to go out around the edges on the large main canvas. So I don't want to use all of it. I want to make sure there's still some left. And I am going to let this dry for about 15 minutes. You can shake these around a little, and I just push them down with my finger and make sure that everything's touching the resin so that when I'm done, I don't have any pieces that are just sitting on top and didn't dry. And every time I do this, no matter what, I will have something that didn't stick, but I'd still prefer to have a few things not stick than to have it all be covered with the resin and not be sparkly. So that's my inside. We're going to let that go for 15 minutes, and then I will come back to you and show you the next part. Okay, while I have things drying, I am going to show you how to cut the canvas and get it ready to screw these down into your bigger canvas. So I've already drawn my squares. Now, you don't want, again, to see these edges. So you're not going to cut that wide. You're going to cut a much smaller hole. And like I said before, this one is going to be more of just a dip in the canvas versus a hole. So this one I'm going to cut a hole in, and this one I'm going to cut a little differently, and I'll show you how both of those work. But let me get started. So one thing with cutting canvas, I have found the bigger the hole, obviously the weaker the canvas is going to be, and then you can run into your resin like all pouring in because the canvas is sagging and things. But with this size, the wood holds the canvas up so well because the hole's so small that it seems to actually work just fine and it doesn't do too much with the canvas. Also, I will still glue a lot of these stones that I used in the middle. I'll glue around the edge of the hole, and then because it's being supported, the resin won't go in past the glass. So what I'm going to do, again, I'm looking at this as this being the top and this being the bottom, and there's not a good way to do that with you guys, but I'm going to lift it up and kind of eyeball how I want the holes to go. And so I think what I'm going to do, I'm using a straight razor. And the other thing with canvas is if you look carefully, canvases do have a little bit of coating on them. So your canvas isn't going to unravel if you cut it because it's got that little bit of coating that holds it together. And I will tell you, I cut these and then I check them and then I cut them again and then I check them until I know exactly what size I want them to be. So I start a little smaller and then I can extend it if I want to. So this is not 100% dry, but it's already pretty close. So I set this underneath to see how much is actually showing. And then I go from there. Now I'm going to want a little more to show, obviously, because I think this turned out really pretty. So as I'm doing this, I'm going to have the gold and all the gems come up and around this way. So I think I want that point still, but I think I'm going to open up this side so that you can see one more of the glass. There. It's just so pretty, you don't want to waste it by not being able to see it. And I might even take a little more. Yeah, let's take a little more. The other thing is, because the glass is going to be up on top here too, a lot of the movement of it can be done with the design on top so that you can have a big enough hole to see all the pretty glass you put underneath. But always start smaller because you don't want to cut a hole where you can see the edge of the canvas underneath. All right, cool. I like that. I think that's going to be good. So might even cut a tiny bit. See how this is going in a little bit? I don't want it to fall in and have resin kind of pouring into it. And so right here, the wood is supporting the canvas. So I'm going to get rid of this little part that doesn't have wood support underneath it. And the shape of this will change once I put the glass on top too, because we're going to overhang some of the glass so that you can't see that there's, you know, the canvas underneath. So that's how I cut the first hole. Now, there's a few different ways you can do this. I take this back out because as I'm putting this glass on, I don't want to drop a bunch in there and mess that up. So I don't attach this until I'm finished going around it. The other one I will, and I'll show you how that goes, but this one I'm just going to save and wait. Okay, so this one, I also want to be a hole in my canvas, but I want it to be a dip, not a complete hole. So I line it up to where it's going to be. I set it down, and what I'm going to do is make some cuts like this. And this can go pretty close to the edge. Looks like I drew my lines off a little bit on this one, but that's okay. And this will, if you're going to do one this way, these actually take longer than the full hole because there's a lot of gluing with the glue gun. Like I said, you need a ton of glue gun stuff for this. So I am just going through and see how I'm bending this down to see how far it goes till it reaches. What we're actually going to do is glue those down and then add stones, and it'll give you that dip in the canvas without it being a complete hole. So I'm going to come through and first cut off just the excess because I do have that copper down there. I want to not have too much of that being covered. And then I'm going to add some more copper too as we go here. But so I see how much I need and how much I can take off that I don't need. And then we'll glue up the holes with the glue gun. And then we can add more paper and start getting all of our glass onto here. So I'll do this real quick. Now I'm going to use my glue gun. I'm gluing to the bottom of this part of the canvas itself and then pushing down because it's hard to get your angle right. You can't always quite see exactly where it's going to land when you push it down. So it's easier to glue to this canvas and then fold it than it is to try to put your glue onto the sparkly part and then aim correctly. Okay. Alright. I'm going to make one more cut. So this you just have to kind of play with and see how things go. That one I feel like is a little too tight. I'll probably go ahead and do it with this one. So, yeah, that's better. So again, I'm just gluing these edges and then pushing them down. And do you see how this is creating still kind of a hole in the canvas, but it's not a complete hole where we're going to have a separate set of stones and everything here and then one inside. It's still going to be all just one part of the glass flowing, but it'll be a 3D effect. I got that one a little short. But the good thing is, if you do go short or anything like on this, glue guns are so forgiving because they'll dry quick and they hold stuff in place even if it's not perfect. So I really like using glue guns for all of this, other than I burn myself every time at some point. So, alright, still going here. Okay, so here's the cool thing with using this paper again, and this paper is a big trick for me. I'm going to cover these holes with the paper, but stuff can soak in and around, and with resin, what is so wonderful about this is these are not super sturdy with just the glue holding them, but the resin pours into all the cracks, and then this whole thing solidifies, and it's completely solid. And you know, once you use resin and it's hardened, it's going to stay that way. So I can just start gluing little pieces like this, and I'm going to not try to seal every single crack, but I'll seal a lot of it. But then the resin can still get in and do its magic. And what's nice with the paper is you can bend it around these holes and things. And again, this will all be coated with actual stones. So as long as you're covering with some color, you really don't have to worry about making this part perfect. The one thing with this entire project is this is very time consuming, and even if you use quick set resin, it just takes forever to do 3D geodes in this manner. But that's okay, because if you're like me, you just really enjoy painting and having that quiet time and having fun making things, and so time doesn't matter too much unless you're doing a show or something. Alright, so see, I'm just still coming around and I'm just putting the paper down kind of over the holes. Even with the paper, even though it's not expensive to begin with, I wait till Michael's has like a 50 to 70% off sale on all their paper, and then I go get a bunch of different colors of the sparkly paper. So again, this doesn't have to be perfect and fancy. We're just getting down some base color so that anything that would possibly pop up and show through still is sparkly and shiny. Alright. So, the glue's hot underneath the paper, trying to hold it down. Okay, so that's kind of the idea. Now, these little bits where the paper tore and the white showing, I don't even mind because it'll make different colors as you go through. So, now, because I have done this here, if you don't extend this paper to where you're wanting to go, then your glass looks less sparkly and nice and a little more drab in the areas that aren't the holes. And so, again, this takes forever, but I prefer to go ahead and keep the color going. And this is where it's kind of fun because you get to start deciding like where you want your glass and your color to go. So I'm going to just keep going with this. And again, once you do the resin, this is all going to stick down super hard. So for now, I don't have to use a ton of glue, and I can just kind of haphazardly put it on in the general area that I want it. And you know too that when you're doing geodes, having it a little haphazard is, I think, nicer than having it really perfect because it makes it look more real. Okay. The one thing that you want to watch is get your sparkle all the way up to the edge. You do not want to have white showing. Okay, so this is the general direction that this whole piece is going to go. I'm going to go back around and cover this a little bit more here so that it's not all just in the dip, but that it's coming around. And then I'm going to show you how I actually screw the two canvases onto the bottom. Okay, essentially you're barely going to see any of this paper. It's just, I feel like it gives that extra depth that you might need for this to actually really pop with all the stones. So I add it, it takes time, but I feel like it's worth it. Now that I've got all the paper and everything done, I'm going to show you how I attach the small frames to the large frame. I already did it with this one because we had glued to that and everything, but I left the screws sticking out a tiny bit so you could see I've done that one right here and also right here on this edge, and I'll finish screwing that in after I show you all of this. But so for this one I screwed in two places because a lot of what we did on the other side is paper to paper and things, so we're not going to get a lot of resin stuck to this canvas because it was covered with all the paper. So I just want to make sure this one stayed sturdy. Now with this one, I probably really only need to do one because this one, the resin will pour through this hole and land in here somewhat. So this is really going to be stuck together. I don't even have to go through an outside edge because this one will hold it in place. And this is also the top of my picture. So when this is hanging, the weight of this is going to rest on this beam here. So I don't have to worry about the outside. Now, when you do the outside, just as a quick note, these screws on the outside, I pre-drill a hole, and you find what screws are going to be long enough to go into both of your canvases. But you find your drill bit that's the same width as your screw minus the threads, because the threads are what will grab the wood. And you pre-drill the hole. If you don't pre-drill the hole, you could end up with your wood frame cracking, and that would really stink. So you pre-drill the hole. Now here I don't even have to worry. I can have the screw head sticking out on this side and it won't matter because nobody's going to see it. If you do one on the side, all I do is at the end, I take a really big drill bit that's the same width as the top of the screw, and I just drill the tiniest bit in so that when I put the screw in, it hides in that hole. And then I use what I'll do here on this one, I did that, and then I will also use a glue gun and just fill in the little holes of the screw on the top. And then when the resin pours over, you don't even see that there's anything there because it's flat. So make sure you flip your design over so that it's showing through the hole. And what you want to make sure you do too, when you are screwing these in, don't push down as hard as you can on these, because if you screw them too far in, when you flip it over, you will actually see the outline of this in the canvas, and then your resin won't pour correctly. You want it to be more even with this part. So I'm not going to push down at all. I'm just going to go through this way, and so I will push this way to make sure they both work. You want to do this slowly because the wood they use is actually really strong, and sometimes it's hard to screw through, but it's very, it cracks very easily. So I'm going to hold on here. I'm going to kind of hold it up a little so that it's not pushed really tight against the front of my canvas, and then very slowly I'm going to go ahead and make my drill hole. I'm going to make sure it lines up. So I'm going to go through this till I see it come out and then line it up so I don't have to hold that the whole time. Okay, I'm through. So I'm going to back up a tiny bit so that I can now line up the other one. Set that on there. And that's where we hope that I resin down on my glass enough, because like I said, I braided it. Okay? So again, if I was doing an outside one, I'd then switch to this bit and drill just the tiniest bit in so the head of the screw would go all the way into the wood. Don't need to do that here. So now I'm going to switch from my drill bit to my screwdriver bit. And again, I'm going to try to do this slowly. And I'm probably going to move this again so I can see when the screw comes through. The one thing that you have to watch is you don't want to get a screw on this canvas that's so long that it goes all the way through this one, because then all these little wood shavings go into your resin. And I mean, as long as you've let the resin dry, you can brush them out, but I just try not to get to that point. So I'm going to slowly put this in till you see the other edge. I might have to do this by hand. The angle's a little tricky and I don't want to crack anything, so I might do some of this by hand. Alright, my canvases are attached. They are going nowhere. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do one of these last screws on the edge here. I've drilled with the smaller bit, and then I drilled just a tiny bit in with the larger bit so the screw can go down in. Obviously I started there and then didn't like where that was. That's okay. The resin will cover it. So I'm going to just slowly again drill this in a little ways. And before I get all the way to the other hole, I'm going to make sure I'm holding the canvas underneath in place. And then I'm going to finish it by hand because it caught there, but I don't want to do the drill all the way in because I don't want this screw to catch and rip any of my canvas. So it's easier to just finish it by hand so that you don't end up accidentally ripping up your canvas. So I'm going to do that real quick. Okay, and now that that is in, what I do with these edges is I take my glue gun and I fill the hole in the screw and overfill it. And I go around the top, fill that little hole too, but that won't be a big deal. So I get a little too much, but I fill all the holes. And then as soon as this glue dries, I can take my razor and just cut it flat. And then when the resin pours over the side, you won't even be able to see the screw. So all of my parts are attached. That is the hardest part of this whole thing. I don't love using power tools. I can, but they're tricky when I'm trying to angle things correctly and everything. So some of you who have more experience with that might do better. But we have one side of this is dipped down, ready for glass and everything. The other one has a hole where you'll be able to see through. And the next thing we're going to start working on is adding the rest of our glass. I have glitter paper down that I glued down before. This one's going to be a whole lot of doing gluing. So I'm going to fast forward a lot. But the main thing I want you to know as I start this is that around the hole we created, I'm going to actually glue my stones. And then around the edges of where I want them to go, I'm going to glue my stones. And in this dip along the edges, not the flat part, but on the sides, I'm going to glue my stones, all with a glue gun, so that they don't go anywhere, so they don't fall in, so they don't all slide to the middle, so that I create the line that I want to go with. And then we'll pour clear resin and fill in with the rest. So we'll probably fast forward a lot of this so you can see it quick without having to spend too much time. But that is my plan, and I'm going to get started. on the end. Just pour a little line all the way around. Even though this is outlined in only the peach stones, that's not really a problem because peach stones are going to be in the middle of it too. So it'll actually look like all the stones are just mixed together. Eventually it won't look like an outline of peach stones with others in the middle. So I'm going to actually start with the peach stones that are going to go in the middle of all this, and then I'll start dropping the other colors in. So I'm just getting this all the way to the edges so it goes underneath the stones that are already in there. I've got a little extra over here, but I think I might need a little more over here, so I'll just grab it with my popsicle stick and move it around if I need to. One of those nice things about resin. Yeah, I need a little more. So I'm going to scoop some of this, just try to drag it around without dropping it. Bring it into here. All right. Make sure I have this all over. Looking pretty good. Ooh, had a couple loose stones, but they're getting caught by the resin. Okay, so I'm going to set this right here. Ooh. And then, like I said, I'm going to start with my peach stones all over the place. And then we're going to fill in with that bits of clear glass that's really shiny. And then all that really tiny gold like I had inside here. After I get all of these laid down, I'm going to go back with my finger and just kind of squish them all in to make sure that everything's touching the resin. So now I'm just adding a little bit of this clear glass. I love this stuff. And I don't need a ton, just a few big chunks here and there so that it adds a lot of sparkle to what I'm doing. And then we'll fill in with the tiny coppery gold glass. But see how you can't really tell now that you're looking at paper. The sparkle paper doesn't look like sparkle paper at all anymore. It just blends in as part of the stone. And it's just so worth it to take that time to glue it all down and then to glue around it and everything because it adds such a nice look. I'm going to go back through now that I've done the clear that's really sparkly, and I'm going to find my tiny gold copper dust and just sprinkle that all over. Here is a close-up of what we've done. I know to get all of the picture, the camera has been kind of far back and you might not have gotten a close-up. So here's where it starts. See our dip in the canvas, which is pretty cool. We got a big hole there, but not all the way through. And then it comes on down. See if I can get focused. And this one is a full hole in the canvas. There, I'm not focused. Isn't that cool? Oh, I just love that. And then it goes off to the edge. So, again, once this is all dry, we'll get the rest of that gold off that looks like sprinkles, and we will start adding resin. Thank you guys so much for following my videos. For those of you who follow, appreciate it. If you haven't, I would love if you would subscribe to my channel, like this video, and you can also find me on Facebook as the Frugal Resinista and on Instagram, Rebecca the Frugal Resinista. All right. Thank you so much, you guys. I will see you soon with part 2.